Cinema Caliente gets up close and personal with filmmakers on the art of filmmaking in New Mexico and is broadcast on community television and internet. Cinema Caliente would like to thank the following sponsors: Production Outfitters, Field and Frame, and the City of Albuquerque.
Great people, talented artists and filmmakers, diverse culture, beautiful landscape, great food. Hey, are we trying to keep New Mexico a secret? Maybe a little. But today on Cinema Caliente, we'll be talking to native New Mexican writer, filmmaker, producer, Erin Hudson.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
Thanks.
Born in New Mexico, raised near Route 66, Erin received a graduate degree in documentary film and video at Stanford University. Erin, we're so honored to have you on the show. Welcome to Cinema Caliente.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
Yes, welcome to the show, Erin. Thanks. I've got to see most of your films, and I think one of the trends today is to do big documentary type film, big issues, world-changing things. You do the most personal little slices of life. How did that happen? I mean, how did you go down that path?
I appreciate that question because I often think of the stories I like to tell as small stories. And you're right, very personal stories about people and places and connections to community and landscape and people surviving. And I think it's just the type of film that I love to make. I needed to figure out my voice as a filmmaker, and I kept coming to stories about these very personal experiences, and I just needed to trust that that's the type of story that I like to tell.
Did that happen just because you were open, listening, looking for things like this, or did you go out intentionally looking for a certain story about, I mean, some of these people you couldn't have made up, I mean.
Right, I know. I love that. I mean, it's really true life, real life, I think is always more fascinating than anything we could make up. And so documentary allows me to be curious and be engaged in the world and to always be open for stories to enter my life. And the very first documentary I made was about my grandmother, and she was living in Albuquerque and was in her 90s and just giving up driving for the first time. And she had a great story when she was 19 that she drove a Model A Ford across the country, and I just had always remembered that story. And that's the one that launched me into enjoying the documentary process. And then once I was in film school, I really was given permission, as education does, to be to trust my voice as a filmmaker, my vision, and to really think about stories all around me. And I think once I started opening myself up to have, to be curious, stories just started coming. And whether it be through reading articles, to getting ideas and then meeting people, it always feels like it's synchronicity at work when a new story kind of presents itself to me.
Erin, In Place Out of Time won the Best Short Documentary at the White Sands International Film Festival.
Yeah, it's a film that I made here in New Mexico. It brought me back home, which it was a real delight for me to return to my home state and start making this film. It's about an elderly gentleman in Hillsboro, New Mexico, and Hillsboro is between Truth or Consequences and Silver City, a small town that used to be a mining town and now is still a ranching town, and some artists live there. And it's another story for me of reading an article when I was living in California, and my parents would always send me New Mexico magazines and come back to the place you love. And in that magazine there was an article about this gentleman, Embry Hale, and he goes by Sonny by some people, and he's on a quest to take a picture of every petroglyph and pictograph in the state. And though what intrigued me about him is what his background is. He's in his 70s, and he started this quest late in life. And it's really, he doesn't use a fancy camera. He lives in a travel trailer with no running water or electricity out in the middle of Sierra County. And he's very interested in memory and what it means to be a photographer and to capture place. And he's a very in-place person. And I think I was curious about his story and also wanting myself to return to place and be connected. And the thought too of filming someone who lives in such a small interconnected town where everyone knows each other, there's no cell phone service. To me, I wanted to have that experience. So I spent about 7 months in the process of pre-production and filming, and actually lived in Hillsboro, the small town, and really just incorporated myself in that community and his story.
We're going to show a clip from In Place Out of Time. Can you give us a little background on this clip?
Sure. Yeah, you'll see Embry getting water from his well, and that's how he gets water every day from his home by the travel trailer in Sierra County. And then really introduce that he, late in life, decided he needed a goal, and it was time to live life the way he wanted to. And that kind of launches into this passion he has. And he was motivated to start this quest when one of his favorite petroglyphs was stolen, which sadly enough happens. And so that launched him into this quest, and he's living the life that he wants to. And I think that's quite rare in our society.
Okay, folks, put your seatbelts on. Erin Hudson's In Place Out of Time.
Somebody asked me once, when do you go to sleep? When do you go to bed? I go to bed when I can see the Big Dipper real plain. This water bit's the only thing that kind of makes it tedious living like I do. I can live like this because in a lot of ways this way I was raised. No electricity, carrying water to the house when I was a little boy. I really don't need very much. Enough gas to get to the next petroglyph site, and my camera and film. Daisy, come on. Daisy, come on. Come on. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an anthropologist. I haven't been to photography school. I don't know one camera from another. I just have little cheap cameras, but I go out there and do it. This is the one that gives me a hard time. Let me get my glasses on, maybe. See my glasses? See my glasses? Look here. One side broke, one wing's gone. First time I saw petroglyphs, I was probably about 10 years old. stepmother and I would go down to her brother's ranch, and on the right alongside the road there were some petroglyphs. And she loved to stop and look at them and wonder about them. And they were kind of a mystery to me. Going down grade, making 90 miles an hour. You have to depend on your brakes here. I'd hate for my brakes. It'd be a wild ride till we got to the bottom with it. We'd be going 109 miles an hour, I think. There we are. In my late 40s, a friend of mine introduced me to a petroglyph site. I'd never seen any site like that before. And there's one petroglyph I really was intrigued by and fell in love with. They're right in here somewhere. In my 50s, I went to look at this site, and in particular to look at this petroglyph that meant so much to me, to show it to a friend. And it was gone. And I just stood there. I couldn't believe it. And I just kept saying, it's gone. It's gone. It's just gone. I was just completely devastated by it. Then I became obsessed with the idea that more petroglyphs could get stolen at any time. So I made a vow right then that I'd start a quest on my own and tried to take a picture of every petroglyph and petrograph that I could find in New Mexico. Ah, there you are, you little rascal. You're not a rascal, you're a holy man.
Okay, that was a clip from Erin Hudson's In Place Out of Time. Erin, you received your graduate degree at Stanford University. Talk about that.
Yeah, I know it does have a ring to it, doesn't it? I was really fortunate. There's a small program at Stanford that specializes in documentary film, and 8 people join this program every year. And it's one of the few documentary-specific film programs that's available in our country. And it really allowed me access into the filmmaking world through the documentary lens. I hadn't been in the film world necessarily before I went to Stanford. I was working with teenage girls in Denver and doing more educational programs. And actually the program really welcomes people who have real world experience and connected to people, and I think realizing the significance that documentary film can make about social change. And so I was welcomed into the program, and of course changed my life because it gave me access to the skills and confidence too to pursue filmmaking. And the program encourages all independent filmmaking. So we learned all aspects of the process. And now I have taken that and been able to do that on my own, writing, directing, producing, filming, editing. I often just call myself a one-woman show, which keeps the cost down, so that's always good.
The name of your company, Rotation Films, how did that name come to be? Isn't that the name of your first film?
Yeah, Rotation is a name of my first film that I made in graduate school about a windmill farm and a couple that transformed their land from ranch land into this windmill farm in the suburbs of the East Bay, California. And it's a poetic film, which tends to be my style. And the term rotation, I just feel like it speaks to a lot of what I am going for in my films, growth and change and transformation and cyclical patterns of life. So and the image of a windmill, because of that first film, seemed to represent that term well. So I have used that for my company name.
You stuck with it.
I stuck with it, yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
You made several of your films in California before you moved back to New Mexico. One of those was Unhitched. Quite compelling as everything else you've done. Tell me a little bit about how that project got underway.
Yeah, Unhitched is a film that also I worked on that with a co-director and editor and camera person, Ben Wu, and the two of us also, we read an article about this community in Northern California that had transformed travel trailers into permanent homes as a form of low-income housing. And as we know, urban gentrification takes incredible tolls on people's lifestyles. And here's this community that has really empowered themselves with the lifestyle that they want, and to be outside of a city and to live under redwood trees and to really have community and family be the focal point of this community. So we read an article about this campground and then went there without cameras just to introduce ourselves and to see if it was something that the community wanted to have a film made about them. And they welcomed us in a really generous way. And a lot of the people in this community have been down on their luck, whether it be homelessness, drug addiction, other various challenges that so many people face, and yet I think it brings strength to what individuals and communities can do to create an environment that they want to live in.
Now, what year was that made?
That was made in 2004.
So it was. I was wondering as I was watching it, because they were talking about how, it's almost like they were talking about the coming housing crisis even before it happened this year. And I'm thinking, did she just make this a couple months ago? It was very interesting how they sort of predicted all that was going to be even worse than they thought it was, I think.
Yeah, I know that's and it's. Even it was made before Hurricane Katrina, and we learned so much about housing then and about the need for good alternative types of housing. So it was interesting to see that development as well. But in the Bay Area, housing it's so much more expensive, and that's really was the issue at hand at that time.
You have quite a variety of films. You have 88042 about the post office in Hillsborough. You have a float about senior citizens in finding their youth in water. You have Unhitched about the RV camp. You have The Long Haul. Where do you get your ideas, and why the wide array of subjects?
I think the wide array is just a reflection of my curiosity about different people and how they live. I often think that documentary film ideas are little gifts to myself. I get so many ideas and I can't pursue them all because they take plenty of time. And so when I have time and am able to pursue them, it feels right, and it feels like I should be making that story. So it's just in the moment that a story appears, if the time is right for me, if I have time, the financial support to make the story, the equipment, if everything is aligned, then it's a go. And sometimes it's not aligned. So there are plenty of stories that I've thought of that, are just still in my head. But yeah, it's more of just, like a writer or a painter, any kind of artist expresses themselves in with different topics. And or different avenues, and I think that's my style as well.
So do you find the story, or does the story find you?
That's a great question. I think both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you prefer to do, to get as many of the ideas and projects done in short form, or do you have a goal of doing a longer single documentary piece?
Yeah, you know, actually In Place Out of Time originally was going to be a lot longer. My goal was to make that broadcast length, and it's cut to 45 minutes, which makes it a short film. So I actually have a tendency to keep things really short, and I actually prefer the short form length. I feel like whether it be with the internet or film festivals, shorts do really well, and people, my films, even though they're short, they often have a lot of space to them and are not cut fast. The cuts are quite slow and much more methodical. So in some ways, I think it lends itself then to be a shorter documentary. I, of course, would love to work on long pieces. They just take more time. Yeah.
Erin, you've had a really successful career so far. What's next for you?
Yeah, well, it's what's next is always trying to think of new stories, and I'm also really love teaching, and so that's something that I try to incorporate into my life as much as I can. I'm fortunate in that I have a brother who lives in Alaska, and I'm soon going to go up there and pursue a story in the small town he lives in, and that's going to be very different than New Mexico landscape. But I'm excited about that project, and it'll be a short piece.
Well, hopefully we can have you back on the show to talk about that.
Yeah.
We've been really honored to have you on the show today.
Thanks so much.
Where can people see your films?
Oh, great. Thanks for asking. My website, rotationfilms.com. I have some of my short films online and DVDs for sale as well.
I recommend them.
We've been talking to Erin Hudson, Rotation Films. For Cinema Caliente, I'm Sid Schulte.
And I'm Tony Delaflora.
See you next time.